Good afternoon, YouTube. My name is Brandon and welcome to the Pile Trailer Rebuild Series movie. You are going to find all kinds of information of what we did to start out with this.
Alright guys, here it is.
And transform it into this. So if you want to see how we did that, stick around and enjoy.
Thing is rough, and quite honestly it would probably be much better for me to just build a new one. It would probably be even quicker, but I'm gonna stick with my word. I said we're gonna rebuild it, so that's exactly what we're gonna do. Popcorn bubblegum welds here, bent cross members, so cut off and grind off all the crappy welds. Here's another one. These were cut for whatever reason. That's how our hitch is cobbled on. The tires are junk. They're completely dry rotted, cracked. The axle looks okay. The springs are a bit weak. Oh, and the hitch is got a nice little kink in it. Let's see if we can right about in there. It runs straight along here, and then it's got that nice little jog kink to the left. So we're going to cut the hitch off and put a new hitch on it.
So you're probably asking yourself, why are you even bothering to work on this pile? And that's exactly what it is. It's a pile. Simply because that's what I said I was going to do, and I know for a fact that I can rebuild this trailer so it's acceptable. It'll fit the needs that I need to use it for, and it's going to be far less money than buying a new trailer. So this is something that you guys can probably all relate to. If you find a trailer, you can pick it up, get a good deal, and go through it. And I'm going to give you some prices of what everything is costing as I'm doing it. So when we're all said and done, hopefully the dollar amount will be less than what a new trailer will be. I'm going to start by cutting it up. Taking all the bad stuff off. That brace right there in the background, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to cut these little broken braces off, these little diagonal things, whatever the purpose of those are. I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to cut the hitch off last, but so yeah, let's get going. Let's get chopping this thing up and start getting it in order. So a little backstory on this. I've had this trailer for about probably 20 years or so, maybe a little more, and I was driving down the road one day and I saw this trailer sitting on the side of the road. Looked quite a bit better than it does right now, and I actually paid 75 bucks for the trailer, and it was a family friend that owned it, and I used it for a number of years, hauling mainly just hauling around a small four-wheeler for my daughter and a lawnmower, and didn't use it a whole lot. It's probably set more than it's been used, which is probably why it has so much rust on it. But it's been a really good trailer. It's been parked for years and years and years along the side of my shed garage area, and I figured it's time to clean it up. So now I'm just going over it with a 4.5-inch angle grinder, and something like this, probably the quickest way to go about it is I'm just using a 4.5-inch cutoff wheel, going around and trying to clean up everything a little bit as I go. So I'll let you watch here for a little bit as I get all this stuff cleaned up, and then we'll move on to the next step.
Next thing we got to do is I'm going to flip the trailer over, take the wheels off, because I got some of these welds that I got to clean up, and I just can't get in there with that tire. It's too close. And look at all the popcorn welds here. That stuff is crazy. So we'll probably cut that off too. That'd really freak some people out if we towed it down the road like that, huh? Okay, so the reason I'm doing this, for one, I want to pack the bearings, and for two, the brakes are dragging, so I'm going to pull all the brake assemblies out of it. Just take the cotter pin out. You're not going to reuse it. You're going to get a new one. And those bearings look pretty good, but we'll look at them better here in a minute. Oh yeah, look at all that crap in there. Ha! Look at that. The brake pad actually came unlaminated from the shoe itself. So we're going to strip all this stuff. We don't need it. If this was a car, much of what you're seeing here is going to apply to this. So this is made specifically for this, for drum brakes, and it's to remove this cap off this spring. You just push it in and turn it. You see how that whole side came right off? And for this, we're just going to peel it out of there. We don't really care about it. We're going to do the same thing for the other side. There. And get that garbage right out of there. We don't need any of that. And I'm even going to take the wheel cylinder out of it. Oh yeah, look at that. Good stuff. I'm even going to take the wheel cylinder out of it, re-grease this spindle, clean up in here a little bit, because we don't need the brakes in there. It's just more nonsense that can go wrong. You see the gap all the way around here? That's where you're trying to force all the grease in. So you got a little wad of bearing grease, and you're going to push in the center as you pull back on this. So you're making that gap as big as you can make it. This is manually packing the bearing. This is how they've done this for eons. They actually make a tool. I have one somewhere, but I just want to show you guys that you can do this stuff. You can pack bearings using just your hand and some grease. And if you look, when I squeeze this together now, see the grease start to come out? That bearing is fully packed. So that's good to go. It's ready to install right now. Let's do that. Alright, so I've got that all cleaned up, and I will clean up the actual hub itself when I get ready to paint the trailer. But for now, we're just going to put this back together. So you carefully slide that on. What I like to do is pack a bunch of grease in there. Now we're going to put on our bearing. And then followed up by a washer, followed by our nut. Well, the way I do this is I tighten this down in kind of till there's resistance here, and then I just back that nut off so that it lines up, and then you put the cotter pin through. I want to put this cross member on today that goes here to there. This cross member right here, we're going to cut that off and replace that with a new one. This cross member will actually be cut off as well, and a new hitch is going to go on, and if we have time, hopefully we can start in on putting our sides together. And I'm also going to talk to you about squaring the trailer and how to go about that. So we got a busy day, let's get going. All right, so if this was a brand new trailer or something we was building right from scratch, what I would do is I would build the perimeter of it on the ground, on the floor, on a fairly level surface. I'd put this on, I'd tack this, I'd tack that piece to there, and then I would tack the piece across the back. So the basically you have a square box, and then what you're going to do is you're going to measure diagonal from there, to that corner, and then from that corner to that corner there. Those diagonal measurements need to be the exact same. Once they're the exact same, then you can add a little bit more weld. I wouldn't completely weld them yet though. Then what I would do is raise that square frame up and set them on jack stands just like I have right here, because I don't like working on the floor. I like to work at a comfortable level. So once you have it squared, put it up on some stands so you can work on it and work around it and underneath if you need to. So what I'm going to do now, but whereas we already have this cross member here holding it square and the other ones that are there, I'm going to weld on. I'm going to cut this piece here and weld that piece on the back.
So for all my welding on this project, whereas I'm outside, I'm not using a shielding gas. I'm using 30 thousandths flux core Lincoln super arc wire. And my experience with the Lincoln wire is that I've had extremely good luck with it. Very consistent and feeds well. And I pay for all my own wire. It's not given to me, so this is actually my personal opinion, my personal preference. I like Lincoln wire. So, and we're knocking off the last little bit of the welds. You can see that it's not taking too much to get that off there.
Maybe now that it was going to dump at one time. That hitch actually pivots. Yeah, see that? Watch this. Alright guys, we've had a slight change of plans. Let me bring you in and show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, I've welded the hitch on. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it has a little kink in that. So, we need to keep this build within budget, okay? When I first started this, you remember me saying that it would probably be easier and cheaper for me to build a new one? Well, it probably would be. And if I keep going down this road where I'm replacing everything, I could have built a new trailer, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to do this on a budget, okay? So what I'm going to do is I've welded the hitch right along here, and I've welded a cross member along the back. That's 2x2 by 3/16, okay? That tube is just floating there right now, the hitch tube, right there. It's just sitting there. It hasn't been welded there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here with a diagonal brace from here to there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So that's going to triangulate this hitch, and it's going to prevent it from going left or right. Okay, does that make sense? It's going to go from here to there and from there to there. Okay, once that's all welded together at the front of the trailer, you can see that little sway. That little bend occurs from here to here. So what I'll do is I will put some pressure from here, pushing that way a little bit. It's out about a ½ inch. I need to move this tube about a ½ inch that way before I can weld it. And then that will make this hitch perfectly straight. But as of right now, this from right here to that corner right there, and from here to that corner right there is perfectly level. It's the same exact measurement between the two, and I need to keep it that way. So to keep this measurement perfect, I need to put those braces. If I don't put those braces there and I just start pushing here, pushing this way is going to cause this to go that way, and I don't want that to happen. So this is a excellent way of doing it. It won't compromise the integrity of it, and it's going to solve the issue that we have right now without actually going out and buying a new 2x3 piece of tubing. And look at all the stuff we've cut out of this trailer so far. This piece right here is really heavy. That's probably, oh, I don't know, 40 pounds. You remember that? That's the piece, that cross member that attached the back part of the hitch. And what I've done is I just cut that off. Just made it a little bit shorter, which makes the hitch just overall a little bit shorter, but that's fine. It's only shorter by, you know, a foot, and that's not going to be a problem. Alright, so this is where the angle finder comes in handy as far as making this angle to duplicate that on the other side. So what you do is, and I've explained this in another video, slide this on here, match up your angle, snug down that set screw, and now you have this angle right here that you can transfer onto your new piece. So, and we're going to do the same thing at the other end. So let me transfer this onto that, and then we'll go down to the other side and we'll measure that out. So this is where we're at, guys. We're starting off with a clean slate. I've got the axle off. I've ground off all the bushings, all the tabs, all the brackets. I've got this side welded on for the angle brace. I've got the back welded on here. And I've started cutting the side metal. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure glad that I did actually cut the axle off, took the axle off it, because the springs were shot. Let me bring you over and show it to you. And these are the springs, completely junked out. That one is completely missing the bushing, and that bushing's pretty shot. Okay guys, so if you've watched episode 3, you'll know that when we left off, we were starting with basically a blank canvas, and in this episode we're going to start putting things back together. And I also have a special guest, my son, and if you've watched the industrial cart video, you'll know that he was the recipient of that Christmas present that my daughter and I built. So let me introduce you.
Alright, so today we're going to be taking these cool pieces of metal here, and we are going to be welding them to the sides. I've never welded before, so that's going to be an adventure.
Okay. What do you want to do when you get older? You want to be a welder, right? Okay, take 2. So what do you want to be when you get older, Matt? A welder?
This happens every time. I get the giggles because I get nervous and I laugh.
All right, Matt found that funny that he wanted to be a welder. So what do you want to do? Tell the people what you're doing right now, Matt.
Right now I'm in college. I'm a psychology major. I'll be a senior next year, and I'm looking to go into social work, actually.
Good. Hey. All right, let's get to it, guys. And not that there's anything wrong with being a welder. Matt just wants to be in social work. Before we unleash him on the trailer, we're going to let him do a few practice welds. Alright guys, first time welding right there. Not too bad. I'm super impressed. Finish this trailer for me. Alright, you ready to do some real stuff? Let's do it. That sounded really good. Let me see.
So that's good.
Yep, a little bit closer to that crack. You veered off just a little bit, but you're okay.
Alright, so should I go back in and fix that?
Nope, you're fine. Now just do this side. Perfect. The key is to try to be comfortable.
That's why I get on my
Rest your arm, whatever you got to do.
I don't know why I always do
So during this, we had a little running joke that Matt had a tendency to pull the trigger with his hand because he's wearing gloves, and of course he's not overly used to it, and it's just feeding wire out the end of the gun. So the inside joke was, you know, don't worry about it, Matt. Just pull the trigger, let it just run. It's inexpensive. But the key to welding, one of the biggest keys that I find, at least when teaching someone to learn how to weld and when they try it for the first time, one, don't be nervous of the sparks. So make sure you're wearing the proper gear and everything that you should have so that you feel safe when you're doing it. Because if you feel safe and you feel comfortable, you're going to be more relaxed. So you're going to do a better job. And the next thing that falls in line with that is being comfortable. Get a good, comfortable position. You know, set yourself up for success, especially when you're trying to weld for the first time, especially when you're first starting. Here, there's trigger squeeze number 2. So when you're first starting out, make sure that you're comfortable. So set yourself up for success. Lay down a few pieces of metal. Put a little V-groove on a piece of metal and just try filling that in and experiment with different hand speeds. You know, what does the weld look like when you go really slow? What does it look like when you go really fast? You know, and eventually with practice, you'll do really good and you'll be comfortable and you'll become more confident in your abilities. So practice makes perfect with anything, and this is definitely one of those skills that the more you do it, the better you'll get.
Start putting the perimeter on. Don't worry, Matt, it's only $40 a roll.
I swear to God.
Just pull the trigger and let it run.
They should put the trigger somewhere where you're not gonna like just hit it.
Or just don't hit it. Or you could just not hit it.
Well, like, you've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for like 10 minutes. I've got like these like bear hands. I feel like a bear.
In all fairness, those gloves are built for my hand. So.
Yeah.
Nail it. Yep, looking good, Matt.
You need to check it?
Nope, I believe it. I trust you. All right, good job, Matt. We've got the top rails all tacked on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the top perimeter. Let's get doing that now.
So before tying that corner together, you want to check everything with a square before you permanently weld everything out. And I noticed that there was a little, it was off a little bit, so I just jammed in some wood just to keep the corner square while I welded it up.
Alright guys, we just got a bunch of parts in. Let me bring you in and show you what we got. So there we go. We got all new hangers and all new bolts. Ta-da! And we got all brand new springs. Alright, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be mocking up everything, and everything's going to get painted last. So what I did is I wire brushed down the spring seats, which are right here. This is what the spring is going to go against, and I'm going to show you some real close-up stuff. I wire brushed those down, and then I put some, it's like rust reformer, or it's a rust converter. I put a rust converter on these pads here, and then I just sprayed them with some gloss black spray paint, because what I don't want to happen is once the leaf spring gets sandwiched on here, I don't want any corrosion to happen within that space. So it was important that I got this part finished right now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get the springs on the axle. We've got all new hangers and all new tie plates. We're going to put new springs on it. Then we're going to flip the trailer over and we're going to mock up the axle, and I'm going to show you guys on how to square up the axle to the frame of the trailer and to the tongue.
Now you want to be real careful here when you hammer on these plates down on the bottom, because you don't want to damage the threads on the U-bolts. And here all I'm doing is I'm just putting the U-bolts on nice and light, just a little bit of tension on them. I'm not winding them right home because you want a little bit of movement there. And I'm doing the same exact thing on the other side. Once the axle's all in and 100% complete, I'll go back through and I'll torque all of these nuts down to the manufacturer's specifications, and then I'll cut off any excess thread that pokes out. Alright guys, so now I'm going to go over with you on how to mock up your axle, and this is super important, this part. So I'm going to go about it very much in detail, because if you get this wrong, this part wrong here, next to having good welds, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the most important part of this project. If your frame is square, or even if it's out a little bit, this part of the project, squaring up your axle, can fix that. It can take care of all of that. And that's what's important here, is that your axle tracks perfectly in line with your hitch. Because if it doesn't, it leads to all kinds of problems, especially with tandem trailers. Single axle trailers, not so much, but it's going to lead to premature tire wear, and we don't want that. So the more time you spend on this step, the better overall, in my opinion, your trailer is going to be. So let me bring you in and show you pretty much step by step how I go about doing this. So before I pulled off the axle, I marked the axle center line, and that's where I am right now. I'm back on that axle center line. The rule of thumb with this that's worked well for me is that 60% of the trailer is ahead of you, 40% is behind you. On tandem axle trailers, what I found works really well for me, and I've done it many times, is to take a bathroom scale, put the bathroom scale up under the hitch, and measure out 75 to 100 pounds of hitch weight. When your scale reads 75 to 100, you know you're good where you want to be, accounting in an empty trailer. Obviously, if you're going to put a toolbox on the front, all those other things need to be factored in. But on a tandem axle trailer, if you have between 75 and 100 pounds of hitch weight, that works out well. And you can determine that, you can set that amount by sliding your axle back in front on the frame itself until you achieve that between 75 and 100 pounds. That's going to keep your trailer from wobbling behind you or swaying. I've established that my axle doesn't have to be perfect as far as I'm concerned. I just know that more of the trailer is ahead of it than there is behind it. So I've got positive tongue weight. Now, I've mocked up the hangers. Okay, nothing is tight. I've just slid them through, and the U-bolts aren't tight. You want to be able to have a little bit of play so that these springs can move a little bit on this axle tube. Not a lot, but just a little, so that if you bump them and you bang them with some pressure, you can move them. That matters. I've also done the same thing here. Okay, now to get things rough, which is where you have to start, I just take a common measurement and I do it off the front of the spring. So I'd go from here to the front of the trailer, take that measurement, then come over to this side, do the same thing, measure it out to the front of the trailer. Okay, take a clamp, set it on each side. So now your axle is kind of close to where you think you want it, or where you think it should be. Okay, so does that make sense so far? So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a measurement from your axle face to your frame. So you're measuring between the edge of here and here. I'm trying to do this with one hand and explain it. So you're measuring from the edge of here to the frame. Okay, that's important that you get both sides at this stage perfect. They need to be reading the same exact thing. So if you've got
a measurement of 3.5 here, make sure it reads that 3.5 there. And that may entail you sliding these hangers on the frame one way or the other, okay? So let's assume now that you now have this axle in the frame perfectly left to right, okay? So this axle is centered evenly between the frame rails. Now what I do is make sure that this clamp on this side is super tight, that this is essentially locked down. And I would go as far as even spot welding this front bracket right here, just the spot weld, so you know that this is not going to move front to back, okay? So now you've got a corner of the front part of the spring locked down, it cannot move, okay? Now, this is where this next step you can fix any errors that you made in your frame. Now, we're not going to shoot to have any errors, obviously, but errors do happen, and if your frame's out of square, 1/8 of an inch, I mean, I would say even 1/4 of an inch, you can fix it doing this, okay? But this is important that you do it this way, okay? So now what you do is, remember, this is pinned down, come off your spindle, okay, because that's going to be an accurate measurement with a tape measure. Actually, let's do it. Hook your tape measure on. Make sure you're hooking the tape measure the same way every time, okay? And then come up and measure to your hitch, okay? Pick a spot on the hitch. And that looks like I'm looking at 81 3/8, okay? So I've got 81 3/8 from this side of the hitch to that spindle. Now you fight with your tape measure. Hopefully it fights you the whole way. Now you hook your tape measure the exact same way you did on the other side. It's important because we got to keep duplicating these measurements, and you don't want to have an error in your measurement just because you hooked it wrong. And now we come over here and compare that measurement. And I am looking at 81, I hope you can see that, 81 1/4, okay? So it's between 1/4 and 3/8, so that means that the trailer axle has to come ahead 1/16 of an inch on this side, okay? So then what I would do is I would slide this bracket ahead 1/16 of an inch, reclamp it, and do this measurement all over again, okay? The goal here is to verify and check over and over, okay? So I would again recheck to make sure that the axle hasn't slid from side to side at all, because there is a little bit of play here. You see there is a little gap here and here, and that's okay. You want to try to set your spring so that it's pretty centered in your hanger. So make sure your axle is perfect again, side to side from your frame. Go back and measure from the end of your spindle back to your hitch again, and do it there and check that. If you get those measurements perfect all the way around, this trailer will be perfectly triangulated off the hitch, which means that the trailer tires are going to track perfectly in line with the tow vehicle. And that's what's important for longevity of your tires and for having a good stable trailer. I hope that made sense without a whole lot of rambling. It's kind of complicated, and it's very difficult to film it and video it and explain it as I'm doing it. So hopefully you guys understand what I'm trying to say here. But in short, spend a lot of time on this. If you're going to cut corners anywhere, don't cut them on this step, because you know you're almost at the home run stages right now. You're at the point where you're so close to being able to tow this trailer. Just take the extra time and spend it doing your layout, because it'll pay off in the long run, and you'll be glad that you did. You won't have a trailer that goes down the road that does this number and fishtails and whatnot. If you have any questions about any of that, please just leave them down in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. All right, guys, so I got this thing absolutely perfect. I mean, perfect. Other than using a laser, it's as good as I can get it. So I'm going to go back through now, and I'm going to tack everything together, all my brackets in place, go back one more time, measure everything out, make sure nothing shifted or moved or warped, and once it's all good, I'm going to go back through and just pound the weld to it.
So what I'm doing here is I'm spot welding each corner so it holds everything as secure as possible, and it helps prevent warping as much as possible.
So in case you guys are wondering what I use for wire, I'm using Lincoln Electric Inner Shield. It's 30 thousandths flux core wire, and obviously on a project like this it's important, so don't waste your money on the Harbor Freight wire. I've used it and it's not worth it. If you're gonna do something like this, spend the extra money and get the good wire. It's gonna pay off in the long run. As far as I'm concerned, this stuff's the best, and I buy this wire. This is not given to me by anybody. All right, guys, I know I said in one of the previous episodes that I was gonna remove this brace here, but I left it in there just because I wanted to keep this trailer frame squared. It's way overkill. We don't need, you know, C-channel on the trailer. It's too much. So I'm going to flip the axle ahead. I'm going to cut this off, and then I'm going to weld on the back hangers. That is heavy. A lot of unnecessary weight. Now it's super easy. Clamp your back hangers down right where they fall. The only thing you need to make sure of is that this bar is not vertical. This isn't overly critical, just as long as it's beyond vertical by a little bit. Now that I have this bracket welded on, what I'll do is just measure between the front of this tab to the back of that tab, record that measurement, then go to the other side and make that exact. Measure off the front hanger to the back tab, make it the same measurement as this, and weld that one in place. Lola, we got welding to do. You ready to do some welding? What do you see? She's not into welding today, I guess. She's more for looking for squirrels. But we got to get this thing done. Let's get to welding. Since the last episode, I just pulled out the trailer axle so we can get that painted. I welded on a few of the cross members, basically every foot. I put the cross members on it, which that's all just repetitive, straightforward stuff. And I put in the vertical braces in between the two ends that we already had on from, I think, maybe episode 4 or episode 3. But before we start digging into this thing, I want to go over the budget with you guys. $20 in paint, and we're going to spray it. We're at a total of $252 for materials, and then we got to add in $40 for Matt's wire for all the trigger pulls. Matt's gonna kill me when he sees this, but so we add $40 in for all the trigger pulls for Matt, so that gives us a new grand total of $292. And now we got to factor in labor, right? So we got 24 hours of labor so far, and let's just say you're counting your time at $30 an hour. We got $720 in labor in this trailer. So we've got $292. We don't know what the LED lights are. The metal floor, let's just say metal, $52. I think the metal is going to be less than the wood. $720 in labor. So without LED lights That gives us a grand total of $1,124. So that's what we're at right now into this trailer, $1,124. Let's see what we could buy one of these trailers for. There we go, $239 out the door, gone. See you later. This episode is now officially being renamed. It's going to be the Pile Trailer Rebuild Series, Episode 5, how to build a $239 utility trailer for $1,124.
And here I'm just finishing out all the welds, just getting everything buttoned up that had been tacked together. And as you can see, as I just mentioned about being comfortable, I'm actually kneeling down on a piece of leather to cushion my knees. As you get older, your knees tend to feel it a little more.
What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to finish up a bunch of the welds on the top side. So we got the welds here on the top of the hitch to finish. I'm going to put in this center brace, and we've got everything on the top side to weld. So all the way around the cross members on the perimeter and along the center part of the hitch. So I'm going to get to welding that up right now. Oh, one more thing. I've got new tires, and I had the rims the tires taken off the rims, so I got to wire brush those down and paint them up.
When I'm outside, a lot of people will tell you that you don't really have to wear a respirator. I choose to wear one. That's my personal preference. As you'll see, when I'm outside, I feel like the sun is competing with the brightness of the weld, so I find myself putting my head a little extra closer to the weld than I probably normally would, and I just don't want to breathe that in. I'd rather take that extra precaution and look at, I mean, you can see how much fumes is just going directly in my face, so I like to take the extra precaution. That's just me. A welding mask is pretty cheap, and I find that they're really not that uncomfortable.
Alright guys, you saw me moving all around from like side to side, back and forth, and that's so you don't put too much heat into it in one place. What you want to do is kind of jump around front to back and side to side and try to keep all your heat spread out. That's kind of important because you don't want to put a lot of, you don't want to warp it at this point. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up these wheels with a wire brush and get them painted up. So when we put our tires on it, they're done. So we'll have brand new tires, because those other ones were junk. We couldn't have those. And these are the fenders we're going to be using. Alright, so I've got these wheels all ready. They're all prepped, and they're ready for primer, and they're ready for paint. But rather than just mix up a small batch of primer, I'm going to mix up the primer and do the axle at the same time. I'm just using some Rust-Oleum. It's a rusty metal primer. I'm just going to dust it on, put it in a HVLP gun, and mix it with a little mineral spirit. Alright guys, I apologize. My camera died during the priming part, but there it is, all primed up and ready to paint.
And here's just a real simple way to put radius edges onto your project. And I go all the way around the trailer, just easing all the edges, doing the same way. And you gotta have fun when you're doing what you do, right? This is a hobby. We enjoy doing it. That's why we do it. So, you gotta have fun if you're gonna do it, right?
when we left off in the last episode, I had the tires to mount to the wheels and some other odds and ends that I needed to do. Well, I've since done that. I've got the new tires on the painted wheels, and I painted the axles and I put it back up under the trailer. So today we've got to finish some odds and ends, and I've done a little bit of stuff since that last episode, and I want to bring in and show you what I've done. And I also figured out the angle grinder. I think it was flooded. Lola, are you feeling up to welding today? Come here. Lola. I don't think she's into welding today again. It's hard to get good help. So here are the new tires, and I've also mounted the fenders on it. And that was a little more difficult than I had expected. I put a 4.5-inch block in between here. Just set a wooden block on top of the tire to the underside of the fender. And then I centered that distance right there on either side of the tire. So once I had that kind of balancing in place, then I just took a piece of 3/4-inch angle and welded that to the frame, and then I welded it or tacked it along the front and back sides of the fender. Now, the issue that I had is I actually had to hold the fender away from the frame a little bit. You see this gap right here? That's a 1-inch gap. And the reason I had to do that is because when I put this fender, the back side of the fender, all the way tight to the frame of the trailer, it actually had too much tire kind of poking out beyond, and I didn't want that. So I'm going to fill in that 1-inch gap with a piece of 1-inch angle iron, and I'm also going to cap the back sides of the fenders, because I can just picture if you're hauling something in the back of the trailer and it ends up contacting the tire, that could end badly. Whenever you're welding from heavier gauge to thinner gauge, always start your weld puddle or focus your heat on the thicker metal and kind of, I guess, push it onto the thinner metal, if that makes sense. I'm going to put it through the safety chain itself, okay? And then we're going to attach it like this and weld that link at the bottom. And then on the other end, we're going to have one of these little doohickeys. Well, it fit on the piece I tried. Then that'll go on that. And that fit on the other one I tried. What the hell? You just got to be, I guess, a little more persistent than I was. Maybe if I just beat the thing on there, it'll work.
If it doesn't go, get a bigger hammer, I guess. Now, there are all kinds of ways of doing this, and this is just the way I prefer to do it. I like the idea of having a snap hook on the end, on the part that connects to the vehicle, and a lot of the commercially sold trailers that you see just don't have that snap hook. I kind of like the snap hook. And as far as attaching it to the trailer, this is the method I like best. That's using the existing chain link, and I just think it's a clean installation and it's a strong installation. So here I'm just getting ready to wire brush the bottom of the trailer, and again, it's important when you're doing this stuff, you're kicking up a lot of dust, a lot of rust, a lot of loose paint that you're wearing a respirator. And the reason I'm doing this at this point right now is because I'm getting ready to put down the expanded metal, and I want to make sure that I have a nice, good, clean surface so I get a nice, good, solid weld on it.
I've got the decking all tacked on. Let me bring you in and show you what it looks like. So up top, I went on every single one, and then as we went around the perimeter, I started doing, I don't know, every 2 or 3 holes. And I didn't do the back yet because I want to hold off until I do the tailgate. But you see how these ribs are like this? What I want to do is I want to take these ribs and fold them over flat, so that you don't have that little sharp point right there. So before I do this though, I haven't quite figured out how we're going to do the tailgate, so I'm just holding off on doing any tacks along this. But yeah.
So now we're going to move on to filling in that little filler strip, that 1 inch wide. And all I'm using here is just, it's 1 inch by 1 inch angle iron. It's nothing structural, it's just simply to fill in that space so I could get the fender exactly where I wanted it. And then I'm just going along it, stitching it with 1 inch welds, and then we'll start on our template and start putting our inner fender liner on. And that's what the inner fender liner connects to at the bottom side of that. So here I've just got some scrap cardboard. I'm having to do it in 2 pieces, so I'm lining that up, making a little vertical line right there so I know that when I trace this, that the 2 template halves will line back up. And eventually, once it's all cut out, that's where I'll tape it together.
And it just started to pour, so it looks like we got to go inside and cut these templates out. Holy!
And now I just line that back up to the line that I made and tape it together, and now I'll have a full 1-piece template.
Alright, it stopped raining. Let's try this again.
So now it's time to trace out the template and get ready to cut it out with the plasma cutter. And what I'm using here for steel is just some 16 gauge sheet metal that I found at the scrapyard. You could also cut this out using a 4.5 inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, or even a pair of sheet metal snips would work. So now that I've got one inner fender liner trimmed out, I'm just transferring that one onto the next one, and then we're just gonna cut it out real quick with a plasma cutter. I tell you, the plasma cutter makes super short work of this. But like I said, there's all kinds of other ways you can cut it out too if you don't have one. And so this is where you just going to stitch it together using 1 inch, just little small 1 inch welds every couple inches or so. And down at the bottom you got to be a little careful because you're welding a thicker metal to a thinner metal. And then it gets even a little more difficult at the top of the fender where you're actually welding 2 pieces of sheet metal together. Flux core wire is, in my opinion, a little bit hotter than if you're using a shielding gas. So you got to be a little more careful with your settings so you don't burn through. But everything came out okay, and I'm just going to move on to the next one. So now that we've got the fenders all welded on, it's time to start fabrication of the tailgate. And for this, I'm just using 1 inch square tubing, and I held it overall about 1 inch narrower than the outsides of the trailer and about 1 inch shorter than the height of the trailer. So that way it'll give me about 1/2 inch all the way around of space for clearance. And I'm just mitering the corners and welding it all together, just making a basic frame here.
So let me bring you in a little bit closer and show you what we're going to be doing with this tailgate. So this tailgate's going to be going right along the back here, and what's going to happen is I'm going to have a hinge right at the very bottom, and then that'll be able to fold down. And on this side of it here, I'm going to do this same expanded metal. So what I did is I 45 mitered the top corners, and I put the bar on the bottom on the inside. And the reason for that is if you completely close this all in, you're going to end up creating moisture and rust. So that'll allow this tube all the way around to hopefully vent out. And for this bottom tube, I'll put a little pinhole on each side at the bottom, probably just a little small 1/4 inch hole, and that'll allow any moisture or condensation that builds up in here to circulate. So the next thing that we've got to do is I've got to cut some expanded metal to weld onto this.
Now this is pretty straightforward here. What I'm doing, I clamped one edge in place where I want it, and then I'm just going along with a Sharpie and a straight edge, marking off where it's got to be cut, and then I'm just going through with a 4.5 inch cutoff wheel and cutting along the line that I made. Pretty straightforward and basic. Clamping everything down just so it holds itself into place and doesn't start sliding all around on it. Oh, and it looks like we've got another tool acting up here. Nope, she's still not starting. Oh, there it goes. There we go. So you got to be careful when you're working with expanded metal because it can be very sharp. So I'm trying to make sure that the edges that are exposed, like right there, you see I've got a nice smooth edge, leading edge on that. So when you work with expanded metal, you got to kind of think ahead on these things, that anywhere that could be exposed, you could expose bare skin to, you want to try to make sure you can get a weld on it, or at least you ease the edge or smooth it, because it can be sharp. And here I'm just going all the way around, welding everything down.
Nola, what are you doing? Looking for bugs? Come on up. No, we got welding to do. I can see your tail wagging. You're excited about welding. Let's do some welding.
And now I'm just getting all those tabs bent around so they're nice and flat. Then I can go through and weld off all the edges, make them nice and smooth so nobody gets cut. So this was pretty fun, and I had no idea what I was doing as I did this. This is just black iron pipe, and I cut it into 1-inch sections, which these are going to become the hinges for the tailgate. And you can see I've just got the 1-inch marks, and I'm just cutting a whole bunch of them.
This is one of those discs I got from United Abrasives, and it's perfect for sanding down these little bushings for the tailgate. Let me show you what the bottom side looks like. So it looks like a regular flap wheel, but it's almost like a Scotch-Brite material. So it's perfect, like I say, for just knocking down the little burr that the saw makes on these little bushings.
And so now I'm just going to go around and knock that burr off with all of these. We'll speed it up because I'm too seeing one, you see them all. And here comes the rain again. So what I've got here is I've got the flat bar, and I'm just spacing it out just about 1/4 inch side by side, and welding every other side of the hinge. So I'm kind of making both halves of the hinge as I go here, and that's just a bolt slid through, and I just rounded the head off. And I think it's like a 5/8. And now I'm just cutting it to length. There it is. So now all I have to do is lay this out onto the trailer. I'm going to do one on each end, one in the middle. Get ready to weld them up. Now if you look at the top of the tailgate here, you'll see I have just a piece of scrap bar clamped across the top, and Now I just removed it, and that was holding the tailgate at the proper height all the way across so I could weld up the tailgate hinges. And here comes the rain again. A lot of rain during this project, and I was getting really irritated having to stop, but it's really coming down now.
Alright guys, so it's rained about 2 or 3 times throughout this episode so far. And the next thing I gotta do is weld overhead the bottom side of those hinges. So I guess I just gotta do it. I keep putting it off and because I hate welding overhead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill in here, and then I'm going to put in a grease fitting so that we can just pump it up full of grease, and that'll help make this smooth. So here are the grease fittings. It's an assorted kit, so I'll probably, oh, here we go, it's raining again. So I'll probably put like 3 of these same ones in there. So those are the ones I'll probably use, and then I'll drill it out, and then I'll tap it so we can thread that in.
In here I just use some of that tap stick, but you could use anything. It's just to prolong the tool. That's it. I mean, you could use some tapping fluid. You could even use oil, WD-40. Something's better than nothing. Threading in those fittings. So here I've just got some 1/8" plate, and you'll see here I'm cutting out some pieces, and this is gonna be the taillight housings to hold those LED taillights. Just using the plasma cutter and a straight edge and zipping them right up, making short work of it. Cut those really quick.
That you just saw me cutting with the plasma cutter. My thoughts are is that those are going to be for the taillights. And I want the taillights to go, you know, something like this. I'm going to basically make an angle iron channel, and I also want to put a flat bar stock rail here, which that will tie into. So the next thing that we got to do now is we got to weld up those plates that I just cut out, and let's get these taillights on. I can see your tail wagging. You're excited about welding. Let's do some welding. Nope, not today. She's excited, but I guess it's not about welding. But I am. Let's get welding. Alright YouTube, we're giving up on the trailer and we're gonna start building birdhouses. Not really.
So here I am getting everything tacked up, and just put some tacks on the inside and the outside, and I find get rid of that magnet as soon as you can. Once you get everything tacked up, put the magnet away because it tends to affect the weld puddle. It just doesn't seem to weld as good as it would if the magnet's not there. So I keep the magnet on, get everything in position, get my tacks on it, and flip it over, get some more tacks on it, then get that magnet out of there. And then I'll kind of bounce around when I do my welding, do the outside, do the inside, and I rounded off the edges just to give a little more finished look to them.
And And here are our finished taillight brackets, and I just rounded off the edges, ground it all down just so it's nice and smooth. And then once I weld them on, I'm going to round the edges over like I have on the top rail of the trailer.
So now that I got the taillight housing tacked on, now I'm just going to go through, mark them out, make the holes for the taillights. Yep, there we go. Cordless drill, flood it out again. Having some issues with tools here. Now I'm just going to drill it out and get everything ready for those taillights. Get it all mocked up. This will all come apart when it comes time to paint it.
So now we have the taillight brackets all on, and when I was grinding this, you guys probably saw that these were vibrating and you were wondering what's going on there. Well, as soon as we get that rail that's going to go halfway up, these will tie into that. These will no longer wiggle around like that.
All right, guys, here I go. I'm going in.
So I had some welding to do on the underside of the trailer. Those cross members, I had welded the top side, but I didn't weld the bottom side. And I hate welding overhead, as you guys know. It just seems like no matter how much you try to cover yourself up and you cover your neck and you try to cover all your exposed skin, that somehow a piece of molten metal find its way in, and it did.
I did it. I'm just a baby. I hate welding overhead. But it came out okay. And I only caught fire a little bit. A little bit of molten metal dropped onto my neck, but hey, it's all part of it, right?
And for you guys that do welding now, you'll know it is part of it. And if it's something that you're looking to get into, for you guys looking to pick up this hobby, yeah, expect to get burned. You're going to get burned. No matter how safe you try to be, something's going to happen. You're going to take your glove off, and you're going to put your hand on something that you just welded, forgetting that piece is hot. So, but it's all part of it, and it's just a great, fun hobby. I don't know. For me, there's just nothing like building something with your own hands, putting it together. You know, a lot of satisfaction in this hobby as far as I'm concerned.
There, we've got our side rails all on now, and we just need to put on our tailgate latch, and that's going to be super easy. Let me show you how we're going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to weld this little piece on here, then we're going to weld that right on top of it. And then we'll cut this to match that profile so it's nice and finished looking. So the way this works is that little detent You see that little detent pin right there? So you just rotate it and it locks in. And then to unlock it, pull it back, off you go. We're almost there, guys. The only thing we have left to do right now that I can think of is wiring. So let's do that now. So what I do for the wiring is I use, if you're in the United States, it's called EMT tubing. It's 1/2 inch electrical conduit. And this is what it looks like right here. It's going to be hard to film it. So what I'm going to do is the way I attach this is I tack weld it all up under the trailer. And I will put this all together, and when I get it all finished, I'll show you what it looks like and how I did it, because it works really slick. Alright, so now we're under the trailer looking forward. That tube right there is where it's coming down, and then it's going to go into this conduit. Then it comes down, and I fabricated up some of these tabs and then slid the tube through it and then tacked the tubing to the tab. So you can see where it stops up back. So the wire is going to come out of that. So then from there, where it comes out, 2 wires are going to go up and they're going to run into this tube. And then the other 2 wires are going to run in that other piece of conduit. It's going to then come out here. It's going to make a loop up underneath this cross member. It's going to run through this piece of angle that I tacked on, and then it's going to run up into this piece of conduit. It's going to come out and go directly into the taillight. So this is going to be a really fun episode. We're going to finish this trailer. So today we're going to be sandblasting, we're going to be priming, we're going to be painting, we're going to be doing some disassembly, and we're going to be doing some reassembly. So the first thing that we got to do is we got to get this trailer prepped, and we're going to start sandblasting it. So let's get going. Alright guys, so let me bring you in and I'll show you how this came out. Everything's all sandblasted now, and then I'll bring you in and I'll show you what I'm using for that little handy sandblaster. So there it is. I've had it for about a couple years. I don't remember how much I paid for it. It wasn't all that much, and I filled that probably, I'm guessing maybe 8 times, probably max, to do this whole trailer. So real slick. I wouldn't want to do a real big job with it, but for something like this, works really good and doesn't make too bad of a mess.
So now that we've got everything sandblasted, Matt and I are just going over everything with some mineral spirits, getting it clean.
So now that we got the trailer all sandblasted and prepped and wiped down, now we get to start putting on primer.
Lola, you ready to do some painting? Oh, you see a bug? Did you get it? You want to do some painting?
So for primer on this, I'm just using some Rust-Oleum rusty metal primer, and I'm just using it in a HVLP gun. But I forewarn you, I was on the naughty list for a little while. I got a lot of overspray all over the deck and the front of the house and the windows, and oh yeah, it was a mess. So when you guys do this stuff, and my driveway is still permanently stained from all this paint and primer, so when you guys do this stuff, make sure you're putting stuff down, covering things. Look how windy it is in the background. I kind of underestimated how much wind there was.
And now here comes the fun part, the paint. This is the part we've all been waiting for. It's been a day, the primer's had a day to cure. I've just lightly scuffed over the fenders, and now we're gonna start painting it. This is what I'm really looking forward to.
So you guys are probably watching this and saying, what the heck is he thinking? Why is he painting this white? Well, there's kind of a method to my madness, or at least I believe there is. So stick around if you want to know why I would decide to paint it white. But I love how it came out. And this, I'm using Rust-Oleum gloss white paint for the paint, and it came out really, really good. And for here, I painted it obviously with the axle out, and now I'm just putting the axle back up under the trailer, getting everything all bolted up. We'll start reassembly now. And once I get all this stuff together, I will make sure to go around and I torque everything to torque specifications. And if you don't know what that torque is, you can go online. There's some charts that will give you an example for a bolt diameter, and they'll give you the torque that you should put on it. But I believe that's real important. And here I'm just putting on some anti-seize on the wheel lug nuts, and then I'll go around and I'll snug all those down, and those will also get torqued to spec. I think that's real important whenever you're doing something like this that's, you know, suspension related. You don't want to wonder if it's tight enough. You want to know it's tight enough, and I think the only way to really know that it's tight is to torque it down. And here I'm just putting on some ground terminals. Everything I do as far as wiring, I always make sure it's a soldered connection and heat shrink, because solder and heat shrink is kind of permanent and kind of how I like to do things. And that's the grounding wire, just making sure that it's bare underneath that ring terminal. And now I'm just connecting up all the wires, heat shrinking them together, just color for color. It came with the kit, really nice kit. I'm very impressed with it, very happy.
It comes down from the hitch and splits to the left and right sides of the trailer. And that little screw that you see is a self-capping screw. That's the ground. And then it runs along this pipe around the cross member, and then it makes a little loop in this piece right here. So if you ever got to replace the tail light or do anything to it, you got a little bit of slack that allows you to repair it if you need to.
And here I'm just torquing the wheels down. I must have got some bad gas or something. So I picked up just a little small plastic tote, very inexpensive, at our local big box store, and I'm just drilling a hole in the bottom of it and drilling it through the cross members, as you'll see here. And then I'm just taking a tap that I have on the end of my drill. Probably not the best way of doing it, but I feel confident in how I was doing it that I wasn't going to break the tap off. And I'm just folding it and reversing it in and out until all the holes were tapped.
I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on it, just so they don't work loose.
And those are just some 1/4 screws, and I'm just tightening them down with a screwdriver. And getting all my straps thrown in there, getting everything organized, looking nice and neat, keep it all together, sticking on some reflectors, finishing it up.
I wanted to put a tongue jack on this trailer, but amongst all of it, I got a little ahead of myself and painted the trailer before I got the tongue jack on. So I'm going to grind off some of that paint right now, and we're going to weld on the tongue jack, and then we're going to repaint around the jack. So see, that's what happens when you hurry and you get excited.
So here I'm just holding it up, trying to, because it swivels out of the way, and I'm trying to decide where the best placement for this jack would be. And then I'm just using a Sharpie tracing around it so I don't take away too much paint. Now I took off the snap ring, so now I just have the bracket. I ground the paint off, and then I clamped it down. So like I said, I didn't want to take off much more paint than I had to, but you got to take off the paint so you can get yourself a nice weld. and everything welded up really slick. And I was able to paint it up white again, cover up the toolbox, then put it all back together. You could never even tell.
That was pretty straightforward. Just put the locking pin, it's hard to see right there, but just snap that locking pin back in and the jack went right on. It also has a grease fitting on the top, which is kind of nice. Back in episode 7, I told you that I was going to do a little bit of a surprise for episode 8. Well, that's this part of it. And pretty much with anything that I do, I tried to add just a little something extra or something special. So the specialness to this is kind of the theme that we've been calling this. It started out as a pile. Ironically, and behind me over my shoulder here, that is the pile left over from this trailer. So this kind of has a little bit of significance to what we did here. So with that being said, let's get going.
So this was kind of a fun part to the project. It's kind of the artistic part. These are just some letters I printed off on the printer, just using a standard font. Printed them off on just some regular paper, and I just put down some contact cement, and now I'm just sticking those letters in no particular order on the metal. I'm just sticking them down to the metal and adhering them to it. And now I'm just cutting off the excess, and I am trimming out, tracing out the letters with my portable bandsaw. A little difficult to do because it's such a wide blade. A narrower blade would be a lot easier. And all this metal is just the leftover metal that we had from the inner fender liners that we did. And I'm just going over it with a little bit of a hand file, getting everything all cleaned up. So that big chunk of metal that I'm pushing these letters against, that's just so I can hold up the letters so they're nice and even. Now I'm just cutting off a piece of flat bar that's eventually going to get welded onto those. Now the tape is holding those letters together, and I just flip it over so I can weld those letters to that flat bar. And then that flat bar will eventually get a hole drilled in it, and going to have some nuts welded to the back side of it so we can bolt it to the trailer.
And there it is, guys. I'm definitely not a painter, but you know what? I tried. So, and with that little detail, we are officially done with this pile trailer rebuild series. Let me bring you in and show you how it looks. It might need some new decking. I'm not sure. But wait till you see it. When it's done, you're not going to even recognize it.
Restricted area. Please leave immediately.
Today is going to be just a really short video. If you've been following along with the Pile video series, you'll know that in our last episode, which was episode 8, I said I was going to explain why I would paint a utility trailer white. Well, here's the explanation to that. Because your trailer has to match the tow vehicle. That's why. Now, maybe not, but that's my theory behind it. So here we are, we're all loaded up. I figured this would be a great opportunity to get rid of a lot of the scrap that we've been developing from all of our projects. These are all the scraps from the workshop. You know, this would be obviously from the bike rack video. A lot of the ties from the coat rack videos, just a lot of stuff that I haven't shown you videos for. All right guys, maiden voyage right here. Let's hope the trailer doesn't break in half. Oh, it's still back there. That's a good sign. I'm going to dump this trailer, or unload it I should say, not dump it. I'm going to unload this trailer at our local town garage. They take recyclable materials. I'm going to dump it there, and I'll bring you out for that, and we'll see how the trailer hauled. Alright, I'm at a stop sign. So the one thing I don't particularly care for is that the trailer is so narrow. You can't even see it behind the car. I can see the tip of it, the tailgate, just up in the rearview mirror. But let me bring you into the side views, and you can't even see that there's a trailer there. So I'm going to take a right-hand corner, and maybe, just maybe, you guys will be able to see it. Yeah, you can just see the tip of it sticking out. So yeah, that makes it a little difficult when towing it, and it's probably going to be very difficult to back it too, just because it is so small that you can't see it.
This is a restricted area. Please leave immediately.
That is awesome. A little local humor from the local police. There, and we're all emptied out. And just so you know, what I was doing was legal. So we're back, and what are my impressions of the trailer after its maiden voyage? I love it. It tows super smooth. You don't hear it behind you. It doesn't bounce around and jostle all over the place. I could not be happier with it. Very happy with it. Common problem is to any small trailer though, they're hard to back up. The shorter the trailer, doesn't matter what trailer it is, the shorter it is, and the shorter the distance between the ball of the vehicle and the axle, the harder they are to back. They back up very quick. And the one thing that makes this trailer even more difficult, it's a short trailer, plus it's not very wide, so you can't really see it out your side view mirrors when you back up. You kind of just have to catch it as it like overcorrects each way in the side view mirrors. But besides that, it's super easy. It's not a huge inconvenience to me. I can deal with that. So I really like it. If you haven't been following the Pile Trailer Rebuild series, I'll put a link here, somewhere in there, probably down in the description too. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm super happy with how this came out, and I just kind of wanted to bring you guys along with me so you guys could see its maiden voyage. Thanks. See ya. Oh, and as usual, please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.